Hey everybody, this is the Writer's Block, and we are here tonight to talk about The Glass Onion. I am actually curious. I'm wondering how everyone felt about this movie recently on Netflix. Uh, spiritual sequel to Knives Out, which I think everyone is already clear on. So, what were the reactions? Yay, nay, somewhere in between? What did people think?
I actually had a really fun conversation about this with Cody, my brother, because I said that I thought it was just better than Knives Out. And he thought that you couldn't really compare the two because they were so different. So I definitely thought it was good, but it was kind of interesting to hear a perspective on the idea that they're too different to compare when I feel like you can definitely compare them and Glass Onion comes out better. So
I felt like the two of them are quite similar, so much so that it really kind of boils down to which cast you prefer and which character dynamics you like more. Was kind of part of my takeaway, part of how I felt coming out of it.
I would say that what Knives Out and Glass Onion both have in common is they're not true mysteries. They're whodunits where you're trying to fool the audience more so than the detective. Especially in Glass Onion, because the detective knows who the real murder victim is from the get-go, but the audience is deceived about that for an hour. My experience for watching Glass Onion was I watched the first half of it one night, and then the next morning, my family wanted to watch the movie all the way through. So I watched the first half of it once, and then the first half of it again twice, and then the second half is just the first half with more context, with extended flashbacks and behind the scenes looks. So it really is a glass onion. There's not a lot to be found when you unpeel the layers. The story's right there on the surface. It's just that the audience is being deceived about it the whole time. I think we're going to start seeing the term glass onion become a metaphor for murder mystery writing and writing in general, for the same way that Agatha Christie made red herring a commonly used mystery term.
Even though I really liked Glass Onion a lot, I think that it's got a couple of knocks against it in comparison to Knives Out. Um, in that the dynamics, as Erica was talking about, are different ones and less approachable in Glass Onion, less universal than they are in Knives Out. Everybody knows what a dysfunctional, catty, bickering family looks like, and there's some real satisfaction in watching the bad guys get their comeuppance. There is also a real satisfaction in watching rich idiots get their comeuppance, but it feels a little different to me and a little less universal, I guess is the best word I can use for it. The other knock in my opinion, is one that I don't know how you avoid it, because um Knives Out really did capture lightning in a bottle, where it really caught everybody's imagination, and it was a way of approaching a murder mystery, which had sort of the genre had sort of perhaps fallen out of favor a little bit in cinema for a while, and Rian Johnson brings it back around, and it just roars out of nowhere, and everybody really loves it. Coming back and trying to do that a second time is much harder, in that you must inevitably be compared to the first, which everybody loved, but now everybody knows what to expect, and you know what kind of ride you're in for. And so it's just harder to create that sense of surprise compared to the original. And so while I loved Glass Onion, I did not find myself as delighted by it as I did with Knives Out, just because I was expecting the ride that I was going on.
For me, just to give a quick reaction, I agree with what you're saying, Cameron. It's tough. It's tough to repeat a performance like happened. I do think it's strange that mysteries have fallen out of favor, because something like Knives Out shows what kind of popularity it could have, and as well as Glass Onion. I mean, Glass Onion, I was looking it up, was really well received overall. People really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I can't count myself among one of those individuals. I liked the first half well enough, and then it just went sideways for me. I don't think it really holds up very well underneath scrutiny. There's a lot of problems with it in terms of just rationality, but at the same time, I feel as if what it's doing is so enjoyable that it almost doesn't matter. And that's what I'm kind of interested in as a writer is, you can do things that really don't make sense if you look at them closely, but does it matter? Like, who cares? As long as people are enjoying, as long as it's fun. And that I think is an interesting question to look at, to learn from. So that's where I'm at with that movie. Mason.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to that point, I think one thing that Knives Out, just in general, kind of as a series, does well, that I think maybe is lost in a fair amount of conversations surrounding stories these days, is that, in my opinion, stories aren't so much about accuracy as they are about verisimilitude, right? Like, it's not about what would truly happen in the world. It's not so much about reality oftentimes as I think it is about what feels real or what feels true, right? And I do think that, like, yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the time when I talk to people about the movies that they watch, a go-to hang-up that people have is it wasn't accurate, or that would never happen, or things to that effect. And I feel sad by that because I feel like something's been a little lost. I don't think that was really the point. Yeah, sorry, that's pretty unrelated to Glass Onion and my feelings on it, but just the thoughts that you mentioned brought that to mind.
No, I think it's an important thing to consider. Also, different people are coming to, entertainment from different standpoints. Different people want different things out of, what they're getting. And for better or for worse, some people are super picky about every little thing. Some people aren't, and then there's spectrums. And then it's not even as if people just fall into those two camps. It's people are picky about different things. You know what I mean? So I could watch one particular thing where maybe I'm super forgiving because it's a genre I like, and I just overlook these things. But then another one that maybe I'm more knowledgeable about than I'm thinking about it. So it's so interesting how we all are as humans and viewers of what we consume in stories. So I think talking about the nature of stories is great, and the whole point of having a writing group react to something. But I think overall, clearly the movie was a success. Clearly it's done quite well, and I think analyzing why that is really interesting. So obviously I'd be interested to hear what things people thought maybe really worked, or if anyone else had something specific they wanted to bring up about it, please feel free.
Well, on the subject of Mason talking about realism, you said it was unrelated, but it actually feels very related with my hangups with Knives Out as opposed to Glass Onion, because, like I said, I would say that Glass Onion is simply the better of the two, and that they're similar enough to make that comparison. But for me, it was never so much about realism as it is about contrivance. Like, the things that I didn't really believe as much in Knives Out weren't because I didn't think they could actually happen, but because I could see a writer going, "Ooh, I'm so clever, I'm gonna do this little red herring right here." Like, I could see the screenplay happening instead of a real situation. And how that ties back into Glass Onion is that with Knives Out, Johnson did set up a formula. It wasn't the same kind of detective fiction formula that people like Conan Doyle or Edgar Allan Poe set up, but it was a formula. And the beauty of Glass Onion was him going, do I build on this formula or do I subvert it? And going, I'm definitely going to subvert it. And the reason that I compare the two is actually based off something I heard from Great British Baking Show, where they always tell a contestant, if you're doing something traditional, that's fine. But if you're doing simple, you have to make it perfect. And so the question for me became, was Rian Johnson doing the formula better than Rian Johnson subverting the formula? And for me, there were a couple of things in Knives Out that felt too contrived for me to really believe in. Whereas with Glass Onion, him subverting the formula with the same kind of tropes worked far more flawlessly, at least for me. So it was really a question of, like, not that he was breaking a formula with Knives Out, but that he was setting up a new one and then breaking it himself. That really ties back into what hung me up with the first one as opposed to the second.
Which, if I may, to that point, I think one of Rian Johnson's strengths as an artist, right? And I will use the word artist here because I think a lot of the time we get bogged down in particular components of cinema, when cinema is in fact just like so many different facets coming into the same thing at the same time, right? But I do think that one of Rian Johnson's strengths, to the appreciation or frustrations of his audience, is observing formulas and either maintaining them or more often dismantling and subverting them, right? I think regardless of your feelings on The Last Jedi, which there are a lot of very strong ones on that we don't have to get into here, I think everyone by far and away can agree that a fair amount of what was going on there was kind of the subversion, right? Oh, you want Luke to be the knight in shining armor? He is now an angry hermit, right? Like, things to that effect. And so I do think that I would agree with Jonah. I like Rian Johnson more when he's breaking stuff down and putting it in new ways, as opposed to when he's setting stuff up. And I do think that this was more the former than the latter.
I can't necessarily speak to the rationale or rationality of Glass Onion. I felt like I didn't pay good enough attention. I didn't go back for a second viewing in order to see if it all tracked, right? If you follow the thread back through, does it make sense? I think that's a worthwhile endeavor, but I definitely didn't do it with this one. And I'm trying to figure out why that is, and I think it's on the strength of the performances. You've got a handful of performers here that I could watch do pretty much anything. Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc is a delight, in my opinion. Dave Bautista I can watch do more or less anything. Catherine Hahn I find always pretty enjoyable. And so watching them play around, and Edward Norton is unsurprisingly punchable as the rich guy, you know, and so watching these folks play around, as a former actor myself, watching them have fun and sort of play in that sandbox lets me slide past perhaps some of the hitches in the story or in the script, to the point where I just don't notice them.
Yeah, like the first shot we get of Janelle Monáe is literally them sitting in a chair doing nothing. And even before they move, I was so engaged with what they were about to do that I was almost like actually like leaning forward in interest. And that's how good the performances in Glass Onion were.
I mean, it's a great cast. So no question
Yeah.
about that. I wanted more Ethan Hawke in my life. I have very mixed feelings about Moon Knight, but Ethan Hawke was, masterful in that. And when he popped up in this movie, I was like, give me more of that. He did not reappear, but I mean, the acting was stellar in the movie for sure.
I wanted to see so much more of Hugh Grant too. Like he popped up for 5 seconds, then you're like, wait, I needed more.
Talk about teases.
Yeah.
And I do think overall what this was going for, I hear what you were saying before, Mason. To me, this did feel sort of new, this idea that, like Erica was saying, this will even be a term that all the information is very much in your face. And then it's just, it being revealed to the audience, but the characters, or at least some of the characters, already know it. And I think that idea is really cool. As is the idea of having an idiot who is the one who does the murders.
Yeah.
I think that's a great framework that they're playing in. And so, I think there's some clear reasons why this is done as well as it is. It's a fascinating setup. It's coming off the hype of Knives Out. Incredible cast, even when it comes down to people that are barely in the movie. You're getting top-notch performances. And yeah, getting to see them all just be in the same room as each other and play off each other. And the cinematography, I enjoyed as well. So, I think there's just, like you were saying, Mason, that there's so many types of art that come together in this beautiful way in a movie that, there was just so much good writing on it. I'll address a couple of things that I mean by rationale. I wasn't trying to be super oblique, but I'll just say a couple. But before that, was there anything else that people were, really enjoying, or why they think this movie was so great?
I do just really quickly want to say that I do think there is something to be learned from Glass Onion, and it's sort of because there is a kind of reversal of dramatic irony here, right? Instead of the audience knowing something that the character does not know, the character knows something that the audience does not, right? And in a novel, everyone will tell you not to do that, right? In my experience, if you are occupying someone's point of view and they know something and are thinking about something, but you as the author are keeping that from the reader, I have never encountered anyone who was, let me roll that back. I have gotten significantly more advice to never do that than I have gotten advice to do it, right? Whereas here, right, like it's a different medium. And in a film, you are observing individuals and you don't know what's in their head, right? I think it's a lovely thing to kind of see someone try story devices that very much fundamentally kind of rely on the media that they're a part of.
Yeah, murder mysteries are a genre that thrive off red herrings, but there's a point where a red herring becomes a fake out. And our biggest red herring is we don't know who the murder victim is. We're primed for it to be Miles because it's his murder mystery party. And we're ready for it to be Duke because we see Duke die in front of us. And we find out that the original murder victim is Andy. And we don't know this because we've been watching Andy walk around on screen, apparently very much alive for half of the movie. For me, the biggest fake out is when we see Andy's sister Helen fall over dead, apparently shot. Then the blood is hot sauce. How did everybody take that? Did that seem cheap? It felt a little cheap to me.
I thought it was fine, mostly because of how much they'd set up the fact that she was carrying her sister's journal around at all time. And like, maybe it was because Knives Out trained me, but as soon as there was too much attention put on Jeremy Renner's hot sauce, I was like, oh, that's going to come back up at some point. So I believed it entirely, but I don't know, maybe that's because I just was conditioned too much by watching Knives Out and decided that I was going to pay attention too much. I don't know.
I hear you at that. Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Erica, that it felt like maybe, and then Mason, obviously, but to me, I felt like they sort of didn't have a choice, because if she did die right then it would make it harder for me to like Daniel Craig's character, because he put her in danger and then she died and he failed, you know what I mean? And obviously you could go that way if you want more of like a tragedy murder mystery, but that didn't seem to track with the vibe of this particular movie. So I don't know if the fake out was necessarily worth it, but it's thing. And also we see all the time, you know, trope, cliche, whatever you want to call it, of, you know, having a book stop a bullet.
Yeah.
A student of a book actually stopped the bullet. The guy was wearing
How fat of a book, Jeff? How fat?
Okay, it was this big. This book.
Yeah, see, if I had an LSAT book too.
Right. I'm just saying that this size book did stop a bullet, which to me was like pretty wild. But anyway, go ahead, Miss.
I was
like,
just
look at this. Look at Jeff's LSAT book. Helen's journal is not an LSAT book.
All I'm saying is, if we're going to put Glass Onion under the microscope for the book and the bullet trope, then we have to put basically every Western under the microscope as well, right? With significantly higher power firearms involved. So yeah, was it unrealistic? Again, absolutely, 100%. It's also a well-established story device that is often used in movies. So did I feel it was cheap? No, because I swear, at least a dozen films that have done it already.
Like I said before, it was a lot more about contrivance than realism to me. And like, in the ridiculous situation with these ridiculous people that Rian Johnson had set up, a book stopping a bullet didn't feel contrived to me. It did seem, you know, fairly improbable, but like it didn't feel out of character with the kind of ridiculousness we had already been seeing.
One thing I hadn't really thought about until just now, as we're discussing, is I think one of the reasons I walked away from Glass Onion, perhaps a little less satisfied than I was with Knives Out. Although again, I really enjoyed it, and it's up there for me. Was that at the end of the day, it wasn't the sleuthing that actually gave the comeuppance. That you get the sleuthing and you get the satisfying moment of, aha, here's how it worked and here's what I solved, and we did it, and you're going to jail, and then it all falls apart, and then Janelle Monáe breaks everything and blows the place up, right? And there had to be some knowledge in order to be able to do that with the energy source and whatever, but it did not feel like it felt like just a tad of a bait and switch in terms of the comeuppance that was given, because it wasn't the comeuppance we were set up to want. Yeah. And I didn't love that as much as I wanted to. It felt like a little bit of a, again, he's deconstructing and he's giving us something other than what we're trained to expect, but I didn't prefer it in that instance.
I will confess that I think this is another moment where it's going to come down to taste. I did really like that, just insofar as I feel like a fair amount of detective stories have trained us to believe that simply coming to know the truth is enough to defeat your opponent, right? But a lot of this movie was about, systems and things to that effect impeding people, right? And at the end of it, Benoit Blanc is an individual outside of a system, which makes it so that he is more mobile and oftentimes finds the truth better than other people in his same situation. But then also, I liked that this maybe criticizes a little bit of the pseudo Sherlock Holmes, right? Who makes fun of the police force so often, but also at the end of it kind of is a little bit their shill at times because he can't lock anyone away, right? So that and particularly if you're not willing to get your hands as dirty as Sherlock Holmes sometimes does, right? If you're not going to put a bullet in Moriarty,
Spoilers.
yeah, sorry, 2 centuries ago, spoilers, everybody watch out. Unless, I haven't watched the Sherlock TV show. I don't know if that happens in that. So apologies if I accidentally spoiled that for you, our dear audience. But I did like this sort of kind of criticism, I guess, of the faith that we put in the archetypal detective. I enjoyed that quite a lot.
I definitely like absolutely what you're saying. I think the idea behind it was cool, and I like this questioning of, I found the thing, and oh wait, that's not enough now because I destroyed it. For me, that's where I definitely was. I was on my phone for the rest of the movie after that part, though, because it just seems so over the top at that stage to have, somebody that murdered a couple of their best friends, and then the other people are like, that's fine, I don't care. As if, we had to have that little napkin in order to build a court case against someone that you just watched murder and attempt murder somebody else, as if we can't go in and have a witness testify against what other witnesses are saying that would have clear bias, and any inspection of their bank accounts would show they're being paid off. Like, it's just, that's where it just veered off course for me. But maybe that's because of the nature of the work I do. But I do think what you're getting at, and again, from a writing perspective, is a fascinating choice, right? To get to this moment where it could end, right? And Rian Johnson being like, nah, I gotta break it. I gotta show that something else. And that ties to what you're saying, that has this tendency to want to break with convention and do something different. And I certainly, get that those urges myself as a writer too. I don't think it always pays off, right? Because it is risky in its regard. But I think you're right. I think there is something satisfying about, no, I'm just going to take it down, or destroying everything had an element of satisfaction to it. So I can see why it could be so enjoyed by people, even if that choice didn't work for me.
And I will also confess that I'm a big fan of the breaking stuff thing, right? Like my two novels so far are all about, let's take people with superpowers and examine humanity in them, right? Like let's take a super soldier and make him a sweet little anxious boy. I'm all about that stuff. So
For
How
sure.
much of it was a desire to subvert, and how much of it was Rian Johnson just wanting to blow up the Mona Lisa?
Well spotted.
I'm just saying.
Jonah. No,
That scene caused me actual physical pain.
Yeah, that also made me less than excited because yeah, his name will go down, but like she chose the path that destroys the Mona Lisa. It's like, really? There wasn't another
No
option
one
here?
knows that except for him, and they're all gonna lie against him now. It's fine. He did it. That's what they'll all say.
But the world doesn't have the Mona Lisa anymore. But anyway,
I laughed when that happened. I'll be honest.
okay, one last little writer thing for me. This is inconsequential, but I do think it is an interesting thing. I wish sort of any research had been done into what Twitch is at all. Like straight up, when they do the whole explanation, like, oh, he got him all set up on Twitch. I'm like, made him a free account, his email address.
Probably did all the ads and gave all the ad revenue. Probably.
Something from a dude who never plays a video game at any point in the thing. So just I feel as if you are going to talk about some subculture, doing some research into that subculture is a good idea. Otherwise, you're going to have people bouncing off it. I remember hearing someone talk at LTUE actually about guns. It was
Larry Correa.
Yeah, Larry Correa. He was talking about how he goes so hard at making sure that everything he writes about guns is exactly right. And, you know, that's one of the reasons that he's seen the success he has. And if he ever gets something wrong, someone's instantly on him about it. And obviously this was a throwaway part. I'm not saying anyone should dislike Glass Onion because of it, but it's like, why have a viewer even experience that moment if it's not necessary? If, 5 to 10 minutes of research could maybe make a difference, which is tough to do with so many things you might need to research. But again, just looking for those writing lessons was something that caught my eye.
You've got to wonder why. You've got to wonder why they didn't just make Duke a YouTuber, right? Because that seems obviously like what he is. Like, were they not allowed to use that brand? That's really kind of baffling.
Twitch was to Rian Johnson what sweatshops were to Kate Hudson. That's the comparison we're making here.
Any last nuggets about this? Are we looking forward to whatever next movie? Do we think it's going to be another mystery? I mean, these have been both very successful, so I can't imagine he wouldn't, right?
The thing that I think could be interesting is what if Janelle Monáe's character comes back as a sort of Watson to the Benoit Blanc? Like, what if we stick with the mystery, but that is how the formula gets changed next time? I think that could be interesting.
No, we got to see more of Hugh Grant's house husband. That's all I want.
Obviously. I will just simply say, as a last note, the sheer cojones to be able to have the most memorable line in your movie, the most quotable line in your movie be, "It's just dumb." I mean, that's bold, because that's what everybody's going to be quoting, and you better have a really good movie, or else that's what everybody's going to be saying about your movie.
I definitely think the movie is bold, 100%. I think the movie goes for things, and that's really cool, for sure. All right, I think everyone's good. No last thoughts. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Obviously, we would love to hear your thoughts about the movie, and I am curious to see, will there be will this be a trilogy by the end of it? We'll all find out together in time. Thanks for joining us all. See you next time, Blockheads.